Hello HBA students. So I've got a video for you which is a little bit different to the ones that I've normally done. This is the question that I've put up for 3 marks for my year 9s. However, for students at the level that are studying in St Paul's that have the HBA tag attached to your name, and you've been told what that means and everything, and that you'll be submitting work to me, I've gone ahead and I've converted this question, which you can have a watch of this video to see the kind of way that you would answer the 3-mark question. I've converted it to a 6-marker. So the 3-marker was describe how the character of a city in an advanced country you've studied has changed due to international migration. 3 marks. We bugged it. We looked at what the idea of this word character of the city means, what the concept of international migration means, but what I really want to do is to kind of show you how this idea of having novice questions can lead to you answering that topic on a longer question, on a more complicated question. So, and also drawing on some of the other knowledge outside of that particular topic that you've looked at so far, like from the concept of urban trends and the way that the city would have been around the 50s after suburbanization took place, but before international migration started to change the character of the city. It brings a completely new dynamic and way that you can approach these kind of questions, and I think you're all capable of achieving. So, question, I'm gonna bug it very carefully. I'm going to look at these 2 words here: discuss. Discuss, another way of saying that would be elaborate. So you are building on your information by explaining, by giving explanation. You are developing your ideas, and we often try to say, okay, well, here's your idea. Can you develop it? Can you say something further about that to explain what it means? I will show you some examples in this, because you obviously are you're kind of new to these concepts in GCSE geography if you're in year 9. Now, an advanced country city, so it has to be in an advanced country. Your example for the UK is Birmingham. I mean, people end up forgetting the topic and they go on to write about London, but they don't have nearly enough information or dates that they need, such as what happened to Birmingham in the 1950s, the 1960s, when Southern Asians started to come in, when people from the West Indies started to come in, places like Jamaica, places like India, Pakistan, and places where the Punjabi population has come from. So, I'm going to try and stop moving my hands. So how has it changed? How has it altered? And as a result of international migration. So we're not really concerned with the concept of rural to urban migration, as I mentioned in the other video. We're concerned with people coming from other countries. And when you see this world, what you might think about jotting down is, well, what other countries have they come from? They've come from countries like China, parts of mostly western, southern China, parts of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Delhi, if you were to think of a city that they come from, and Nepal as another place, another country kind of nearby, right? And this quite links in well with the concepts that we have of the Punjabi characters of the city that we see. I'm going to go through a couple of them in the answer, but I'm going to think about how the job sector has changed as well. Could also refer to the West Indies migration, but we tend to focus more on, I suppose, the Southern Asian aspects of the city and how that has changed. But the West Indies happened from the 1950s to the 1960s, and these types of migration are still happening today, but started around the 1960s. Okay, morning. Now, what you're going to have to do after that, right? You're going to have to think about what ways has the city changed. So the city's changed through getting buildings that offer new types of jobs, new industries. So industries have changed. But what you need to be really careful with, what you need to make sure that you do, is that you look at the physical change in buildings. What can we see? What other things, what festivals can we see? What various things will we see with our eyes when we go to this place that looks different to the way it was in the 1950s or before that, before all of this migration started to happen. Now, the reason why people came to the city originally, and an idea that you could possibly draw on here, is that they would have come to the city for manufacturing. So what we're going to have a look at here is how have job sectors changed? And how has this influenced the way that the city looked? So in the pre-1950s, job sectors like manufacturing would have been the things that brought people to this city. Okay, there was great industry, there was great manufacturing of products, there was a lot of factories. You would say that that's the way that the city looked. Factories, if you remember the image of the factory in the previous video that I put up for the previous task, there was a factory in that, and it was a little bit run down in the 60s and the 70s. And that's when people needed to start thinking about how can we start to make a living, when the manufacturing business, steel industry, manufacturing of products on a line started to go down a little bit. So when this became a bit of a problem, when this was an industry that no longer provided as many jobs to these migrants, what could they do? And what we see recently and over the last, let's say, 30 years is a new aspect of job sector. We've got restaurants, service industry. This is what we call the tertiary industry rather than the secondary manufacturing sector. So restaurants provide a service. But again, how has it changed? Rather than having factories now in the city centre, we see places like the Curry Mile. The Curry Mile is a strip on the Balti Triangle, is a place in Birmingham that we call the Balti Triangle, and you will see 10s and 20s and 30s of shops, lots and lots of shops, restaurants that sell this version of South Asian cuisine. And in the shops themselves, and again, if you were in my class, you would have seen the pictures of the shops, and you can imagine the ones that you would see in London as well. You've got symbols that come from South Asia on those shops. I won't attempt to draw them, but you can have a look yourself if you were to type in the Curry Mile. You'd see examples of those symbols. So your Asian cuisine, your curry, it's a spoon, your curry that they're going to eat or potentially purchase along the Curry Mile is coming from these various shops, and they all sell their own version of it. But it would never have existed if it weren't for the spices that have been brought over from the South Asian culture or from South Asian cuisine. Okay, so it's really important to mention that these shops are popping up there. It's the physical buildings that we see of these restaurants that's scattered across the city, but in this case they're actually concentrated across the city. Okay, now that's just one extra idea. You can watch the other video and you can have a look and talk about the temples, the gurdwaras. You can talk about the Hindu temple that I showed you in my class if you're in my lesson, or you can look up what kind of Hindu temples you can find. But in terms of places of worship, these are buildings that that have changed from being mostly Christian buildings before the 1950s, because the population was 53% white British before the 1950s. So again, data that's going to be really useful for us. Sorry, I should say this was close to 100%. Again, if you watched my previous video, you would have seen that pre-1950s, post-1950s, we're going to see that change. We're going to see this percentage go down, okay, and we're going to see by 2015 the population of white British has changed to 53%, okay, which means that there's 47% of the population is now ethnic minority. So as a result, places of worship are clearly going to be very different in most cases. So what places of worship do we see? We see gurdwaras for the Sikh religion. We see Hindu temples. We can see mosques. Okay, and they bring this culture. You can refer to the named Hindu temple that I gave you, which is the Balaji temple. I will not attempt to spell the name of the Gurdwara, but you can look it up again. The Gurdwara, any of the names of the Gurdwara temples and when they were built. This one was built, I believe, in 2006. So there's so many things that you can refer to here, but we physically see the changes in these in the design differences here. These ones are much more colourful. They have grandeur about them. Okay, they're very large. They stand out in the city. Okay, whereas you could see that the Christian buildings would have blended in much more at times. Okay, you'd still be able to notice the difference between that, but okay, you have so much information that you can refer to here. I really want to see you draw on some of your knowledge on the changing of job sectors because of migrants, bringing in all of these various different jobs that they can do, and also the changes in the places of worship. A structure that I recommend for you to use is Peel, but I'm not going to go into that too much. Point, evidence, explain your evidence, link your evidence back to a bit of your theory and knowledge, such as this concept of sectors of jobs changing and that we have physical buildings that change as a result of that, and then link back to the question. As a result, it's clear to see that the city of Birmingham has changed through the character of the city changing through international migration because of this popping up of restaurants, or because of this popping up of places of worship. Just an example of what you would say at the end of that link sentence there. It's very important to make it very explicit what you're trying to say there. Okay, if you have any difficulty with that, let me know, but I think there's plenty of information for you to use. Good luck.